Welcome to the Built for More podcast. This is for the woman who wants to get the most out of herself in fitness, business, and in life. So if you want to learn the skills, the strategy, and the mindset to get the most out of your body, your mind, and your business, you're in the right place. Welcome back, guys. Today I'm going to be talking through my own journey in competitive bodybuilding and the biggest lessons that I've learned from both competing in and coaching in this space for over 10 years now. If you've followed me for a while, you might know that I've competed, but what you might not know is that I've actually done 5 competing seasons since 2015, which is when I first started tracking my fitness journey online. And shout out to the OG followers who have actually been following along since 2015. It's been a long time. So when I first started competing, it was nowhere near as popular as it is now. And it was very much a bro science way of coaching back then. It was your typical chicken and broccoli diets, extreme water loading and cutting, no cardio club coaches, and so many things that I would just never, ever do with a client nowadays. A lot of the lessons that I've learned about how to best coach an athlete to the stage has been through my own lived experience with the good, the bad, and the ugly side of comp prep. So in this episode, I want to walk you through the biggest lessons that I've learned from those preps that truly inform how I coach today. So let's dive straight on into it. Lesson 1, more restriction is not always better. Obviously, comp prep is a restrictive sport. There's always going to be an element of controlled restriction. We're dieting down. We need to get lean. At the end of the day, it's going to be restrictive. But when I say I've been restricted to the nth degree, let me paint you a picture of what that has looked like in the past for me. In 2014, I actually started a prep that I didn't finish for a bunch of reasons that you're going to learn about today, because when I start talking through what I was told to do in that prep, I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be absolutely gobsmacked at the protocols that they had me on. So in that first prep I started in 2014, I didn't know much about the sport. It was, as I said, it was not popular back then. So I just went to the coaching company that kind of did the most competitors at the time in Melbourne back then. It was very extreme from the get-go. I was on no carbs whatsoever except for vegetables from the very start of that prep. So my diet was very much chicken, vegetables, and coconut oil for 6 meals of the day. Now, I wasn't allowed to have oats or any sort of sweet meals. I remember the only sweets I was allowed to have was 100 grams of blueberries, post-workout only. And if you guys track your macros, you would know that there is a very insignificant amount of carbs in 100 grams of blueberries. So it's pretty extreme on that front. But they took it one step further as well and really restricted a lot around the lifestyle choices that you made. So they were really big on eliminating any sort of environmental estrogens, toxins, microplastics, that sort of stuff. And while I absolutely do believe in this, and it is something that I am really mindful of in my day-to-day life, in this environment, it was taken to such an extreme level, to the point that they didn't want me to wear makeup the entire prep. And at that point in my life, I think I was like 24 years old or 23 maybe. And I was still pretty insecure. Like, I wasn't really somebody to leave the house without makeup on. And they didn't want me to wear makeup the whole prep. I also wasn't allowed to wear fake tan because of the chemicals in fake tan and how that could be absorbed through my skin, which, look, it absolutely makes sense. There is chemicals in fake tan. Our skin is our largest organ. It's obviously not the best thing for you. But my view on all of these environmental toxins and estrogens is that we want to limit our exposure, but we're never going to be able to completely eradicate it. So you kind of have to pick your poison with that stuff and the stuff that you're willing to do versus not do. They also didn't want me to heat my food in microwaves. I remember they had a oven type thing in the gym. I don't actually know what it was called. I don't even think air fryers existed back then. So they would make you reheat your food in an oven or in a pan. Definitely not a microwave. No nonstick pans. It was just so strict. Eating out of glass, not plastic, which is fine. That's something that I did anyway. But you get the picture. Basically, it was not just about, restricting your diet. It was about restricting literally every piece of pleasure or comfort that you had in your life. And while, of course, in prep, you need to make sacrifices and you're going to have to cut out a lot of your creature comforts, it doesn't have to be that hard. And taking it to that level of extreme is just going to completely take all of your enjoyment out of the process. And you know what? My body didn't even respond that well to it. Like, I got to the point I wasn't responding and I was doing all this extreme stuff that's why I actually pulled out of that prep, because my gut was like, something doesn't feel right about this. So I decided not to continue that prep and didn't end up stepping on stage until the following year. However, that following year was not that much better of an experience, if I am honest. There was none of that cutting out all of the fake tan and makeup. Like, that was all fine. That wasn't considered. But I was put on a very strict meal plan that I was on for the entirety of that prep. So I was eating the exact same meals every single day for that whole prep. Now, I think at the time when you're on a prep and you're following a meal plan, it's all well and good at the time, right? But I do think that when we follow a strict meal plan, the same foods every single day for a really long period of time, it does create so much restriction of different types and other foods that we enjoy that then can really feed into that post-comp rebound where we really struggle. And that is exactly what happened to me. So after being on this really strict meal plan for so long, I didn't actually calculate my calories at the time, but after it, I did, and it would have been about 900 calories. So let's say part of it was the fact I was on a strict meal plan. Part of it was I was literally starving with a very extreme low level of calories. Either way, I really struggled post-comp, and I actually gained a lot more weight than I wanted to. I really struggled with my relationship with food then, and I guess I struggled with control around food, particularly around sweets, because I had been on such a strict meal plan for so long. And having that experience really made me quite passionate about teaching clients how to track their macros so that they don't have that same experience of being on rigid meal plans year round. Now, I do still think there is a time and a place for a meal plan, so I'm definitely not totally against them. I've got clients that do use meal plans, both lifestyle and comp prep, for different reasons, right? Sometimes you just don't want to have to think about it. Like, there's too much decision fatigue. If you are having to prep your meals when you're already busy in prep, you just want someone to tell you what to eat. Totally get that. That's so fine. When I use a meal plan in a client's comp prep, it's very much focused on still making sure there's enjoyment there, making sure there's still foods that they really like in there so that they aren't feeling too deprived, and getting constant feedback. How's this feeling for you? Is there anything that you're getting really sick of that you want me to change? Like, making sure I work with the client to ensure that it doesn't create those problems post-comp. And then outside of comp prep, in an off season, I do think this is a really good and important opportunity as a competitor to experiment with tracking your macros, because not only does it teach you a lot about food that's going to set you up so much better for life beyond bodybuilding, but it's also going to give you that time to have a little bit more food freedom and flexibility that then, if you are following a meal plan in prep, then it's not something that's built up over time that you're really psychologically burnt out from following meal plans year round, right? Like, you want to kind of get into prep being in a really good headspace and not already feeling restricted. So I think that's really important. And obviously when it comes to a comp prep and you're getting to the tail end, there's going to be a lack of variety that you're having in foods because you're just on low calories and you do just need to basically eat the same thing on repeat to minimize variables. But I think the shortest amount of time that we need to do that for, the more we can look after someone's relationship with food. And that is truly important at the end of the day. So lesson 2, a prep shouldn't be 20 weeks of absolute torture. Yes, prep is going to be hard. We know it's going to challenge us physically and mentally. But you shouldn't feel like you are absolutely battling from the get-go and for an entire 20-week period. There are important strategies that we can implement to make sure we take some of that pressure off and give you physical and psychological reprieve throughout a comp prep. So, for example, that first show I was telling you guys about where I started a prep but I didn't finish it, I didn't get a single refeed or high carb day. Not only was I given no carbs day to day, I also got literally no refeeds. And my body stopped responding. I got to the point where I was eating nothing and I just wasn't shifting weight anymore. And this is really important to understand, right? Because not only does a refeed or a diet break give you a nice little psychological boost so that you can keep on going, it also actually has metabolic and hormonal benefits to allow your body to keep progressing without just having to dig deeper and dig deeper. So to me, it is a big red flag if you are not getting any high carb days, any refeeds, any diet breaks throughout a prep, because it's just going to get so much harder and you're not getting any reprieve. But you're also going to put yourself in a position where your body doesn't respond as well because it's not getting that boost every now and then. So that's why diet breaks and refeeds are so important. Like if you aren't responding, sometimes, yes, it means that we need to drop calories, but sometimes it actually means we need to pull back. And I really noticed this. So as I went through preps, that prep I did in 2015, which ended up being the first time I stepped on stage, I was given cheat meals, and that was much more effective. They were completely free meals, which was like go and eat a pizza or a burger every few weeks, which is not really something I ideally would do now. I prefer tracked refeeds, and that's what I kind of did from my third prep and beyond. And I like them to be tracked because that way I can make sure that I'm getting more carbohydrates specifically, not just blowing out my fats on like a dirty burger, which isn't going to have as much benefit metabolically. So I think tracked refeeds is better than just free cheat meals, but case by case basis. Some people do still use free cheat meals, and I think they can be used at the right time to keep you progressing as well. But the moral of the story with that lesson is that the prep shouldn't be an absolute drainer for the entire 20 weeks. Like the last 8 or so weeks is going to be really hard and a real grind, but it shouldn't be torture the whole way through. Lesson 3, your prep doesn't end after you step off stage, and your reverse diet is not optional. Now, I want to tell you a story about the first show that I competed in. After that show, I stepped off stage and never heard from my coach again. They completely ghosted me, and not just me, everyone else on my team that competed that season, which meant that I had absolutely no reverse diet support or psychological support in that first post-show experience. And I believe not having that support was a big part of why I did gain more weight than I would have wanted to, ideally, post that first comp, because I didn't know any better. I'd done a lifestyle reverse diet myself before, but I'd never done a comp before, so I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't really know what that food noise was going to feel like. I didn't really understand the physiological responses my body was going to have to be telling me to eat and to gain weight, right? And that's really hard to shut off. So having someone in your corner to help support you through that is so important. And obviously, most coaches won't ghost you post-comp, I would hope. But what I do see happen a lot is sometimes when people are struggling post-comp, all they want to do is actually shut off their coach and take a step back from coaching, from tracking, all of those things. And it's actually the time that you need the most support. So it is so important that even if you're feeling uncomfortable, even if you're struggling to stick to the plan, that time is actually when you need your coach and to lean on your coach the most. So the way I like to look at this is, and I always tell my clients, like, your prep actually ends 4 weeks after you step off stage, not once you get off that stage, because that gives us some time to actually start building up your calories and also navigate those psychological challenges of your body shifting, of that food noise when you're in that post-comp state. And those first 4-ish weeks, that's where you're going to be most sensitive to weight regain, but it's also where you're going to be most responsive to a reverse diet because you're so lean, you're actually really insulin sensitive. So that means what we can do is we can actually utilize that to get your calories up faster to a higher point pretty quickly. And I see this happen pretty fast when we do this right. And that's super important because it silences that food noise once you get those calories up, once you regain that healthy weight in a controlled way. And so we continue our daily check-ins with our clients till about 4 weeks post-show once we've got them up to like a decent level of calories. So that is why that phase is so important. And it's important that as a competitor, you don't see it as optional. Like, it's part of your prep. You've got to do it and you've got to lean into the support of that. Even though a lot of your body, will be telling you to step away, to stop tracking, to just eat whatever you want. Like, lean on your coach and have that conversation, because they're there to support you both physically and psychologically through that phase. Lesson 4, the stage will always be there. More time always equals a better physique, and rushing it will cost you. Now, again, I've had my own experience with this and learned this lesson the hard way. And it was after I got my breast implant surgery at the end of 2016. So for context, I competed for the first time in 2015. I did it again in 2016, 12 months later. Then I got my boobs done after that show. Now, I had always wanted to get my boobs done even before I entered the sport of bodybuilding. I've always been super flat-chested. My surgeon, when I went and met with him for the consultation, said I was an AA minus, so I feel like that's basically concave to paint you a picture of how flat-chested I was. So I'd always wanted this done. And I thought, getting into bodybuilding, I was like, great, okay, well, if I get this done, this is going to really balance out my physique. Like, it is going to complement what I'm doing. Let's do it. Let's get it done before I next compete. But at that point in time, I'd been competing, obviously, each 12 months. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to compete in 12 months' time again. I can't wait to get back up there. So I got my boobs done in the December, and I competed again in September. So literally 9-10 months later. Now, competing in that comp is probably one of the biggest regrets I have in my entire competing journey, because I was so awfully disappointed with the package that I brought to the stage that day. Once I got up there and saw the photos of me on stage, I realized I just hadn't really progressed from my previous prep. I was maybe a little bit leaner, I'll give myself that. But in terms of muscle development, if anything, I'd gone backwards. I think we underestimate sometimes how much toll these surgeries have on our body and how much they impact our training. Like, I was out of upper body for 12 weeks. And then even then, it took a while to fully get my strength back. So of course, I hadn't got the development back yet. But stubborn young me that wanted to get back up on that stage just rushed it. I was like, no, I'm doing it again this year. And I wish I didn't, because I wasn't happy with what I did. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way. So after that show, that was when I decided to actually take 2 years in between my next competing season. And I am so grateful for that, because that allowed me to then make sure I brought a much better package. I'll also say that particular show that I competed in where I wasn't happy, that's the only time in my entire competing journey where I didn't win the bikini open at the Vic State titles. And that still hurts my soul to this day. But we have to learn these lessons sometimes the hard way. What I will say is the best progress I have ever made between shows is when I competed in the ICN for the last time in 2019, and then I didn't compete again until 2022 with the IFBB. So I actually had 3 whole years between those shows, and that is the biggest improvement I ever made. Now, I hadn't actually intended to take a 3-year break. That was the whole COVID situation. So my initial show I was going to do got cancelled, and that's what pushed me back a whole year. But I'm so grateful that that happened, because it allowed me to bring my best ever package to that IFBB show. And I was so incredibly proud of the progress that I had made. So as much as 3 years might feel like a huge amount of time between shows, it's actually not in the sport of bodybuilding, because building muscle takes time. This is a sport of long-term gratification. The stage will always be there, and no one has ever regretted taking more time. They've only ever regretted rushing it and being disappointed with the package that they put on that stage. So my advice there is always listen to your coach and their feedback as to how much more time you need, because if they say that you need more time, it's genuinely coming from a place of love and wanting the best for you. This is something I'm pretty honest about when it comes to speaking to clients or potential clients. And I've seen it before. I've seen people be like, oh, no, that's too long. I don't want to wait that long. I'm going to go find a coach that will do it for me faster. And that's cool, because that's obviously not aligned with my values around the sport, which is it is so important to set up the right foundations, both from a muscularity perspective, a metabolic perspective, a hormonal perspective, and even a mindset perspective, and making sure that you're in a good spot with your relationship with food. So those foundations and taking the time to set that up is absolutely key. Lesson 5. Your peak week can be the difference between winning and not placing. Now, don't get me wrong on this one. There's obviously a lot of people that don't place and they've still peaked absolutely perfectly for them, and it's just that they need more muscle or they need more conditioning or whatever it is. But what I want to highlight is that your peak can really make or break your results on stage. And my experience with this. So that same show where I felt like I hadn't really built enough muscle after getting my breast implant surgery, the peak to that show also completely failed me. And I truly believe this is also why I wasn't happy with what I put on stage that day. I was so flat on that stage that when I watched back the videos, it looked like I had no glutes whatsoever. And the best way I can describe it is it looked like my glutes were flapping around on stage. I remember when I first saw it and I was like, what is going on? Why do they look like that? And that was probably the first time that I was able to really understand what a full muscle looks like compared to what a really flat muscle looks like. And that is key. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why having a really experienced coach in the comp prep space is so important, because learning and understanding what that looks like and on different bodies as well is key to peaking an athlete properly and being able to recognize if they need more food or if they don't, like, and being able to manipulate that peak to bring out their best. So I remember in this peak, so the coach that I was working with, I worked under him for the previous season as well. The peak was absolutely fine. And I remember we tried a different strategy. So what we did was we actually front loaded the carbs a bit more. So had a few high carb days. And then the day before the show, we actually dropped carbs right back to baseline. So back to like my dieting level of carbohydrates, with the intention that this would keep me as dry as possible. And while I was very dry, I was also very flat. And this method just totally did not work for me and my body. And obviously over time and the fact that I've competed in many shows since then, something that I've learned is that I have one of the bodies that I have a very good metabolism, I would say, and I tend to churn through food and carbs pretty quickly. So that means if I look really nice and full in the evening, go to bed, I'm going to wake up a lot flatter. So I'll chew through those carbs. Whereas some people can go to bed looking full and still wake up holding great fullness. Everyone's body is so different with this. And look, to be honest, you have to try things to know if it works for you sometimes. So I don't necessarily regret that, but it was a really powerful lesson to me that taught me so much about the importance of peaking and the importance of really understanding an individual's body. Like, for context, when I did my last IFBB season, my Japan show, I was eating 750 grams of carbs the day before I stepped on stage because my body was chewing through it so much that I was just getting flatter overnight every single night through the carb up. Like, I wasn't really taking up the carbs. So my body needs a lot of carbs, which means that doing a pullback day is just not a good idea for me. And this is why it's so important, like I said before, to work with a coach that actually truly understands this, because peaking is such an intricate science. But it's also so important, like from a coaching perspective, to experiment with your athletes day to day, get photos of how they're looking in the evening after all their food and then in the morning again, and comparing, okay, what actually does happen to their fullness overnight? Like, how do they hold it throughout the day? Does their gut distend after a full day of food, or do they actually look amazing? Do they look better drinking heaps of water, or do they look better when they drink less? Everyone's so different. Most of our clients are drinking a decent amount of water on show day, pretty much equivalent to a normal day of drinking water, because majority of people actually look better when they're really hydrated. And that's a mistake I also made in that peak. Is back then it was very big on like water loading and water cutting. So I'd potentially have, 7 liters for a few days in the carb up, which is excessive. You don't need to do that. Again, one of those old school bro science bodybuilding things. And then I would drink next to nothing on show day, which is so not necessary and actually a bit dangerous to be not drinking anything on show day. It's important to stay hydrated. Our bodies and our muscles look better when they are hydrated. We need water to get those carbs and that sodium into our muscle cells. So it's really important to understand that when it comes to peaking and to be looking at how an individual responds to different stimulus, essentially. Some people soak up carbs really quickly. They just have better they have better nutrient partitioning, and so therefore they'll uptake carbs a lot faster and they'll probably halt fullness a lot more and a lot easier too. So everyone is super different. You can't copy someone else's peak, and it's important to have that really close monitoring during a peak week, multiple times a day, checking in with your coach. And the last lesson is managing stress should be equally as important as your training and nutrition. Now, you guys know I harp on and on about managing your stress for so many different reasons, but when we're looking at it from a comp prep lens, if you are super stressed, one of the biggest causes of digestion issues like bloating, constipation, and other gut issues is literally just stress. And so if you're running on adrenaline, trying to get everything done, like prep's stressful because you've got a lot of boxes to tick, right? So if you're in that state, then it's common to also experience gut issues, and that impacts your prep. It can also impact fat loss from elevated cortisol. Now, we've spoken about this in a previous podcast. If you want to go and listen to it, I think it was episode 2. But basically, cortisol being elevated is going to impact our blood sugar. Therefore, it's going to impact our ability to lose body fat as well. So we can get away with elevated cortisol for short periods of time, but not chronically. And that's why looking after our stress, looking after our sleep, which is where we regulate that cortisol, is going to be so important. Also, when we're in a comp prep, we're doing a lot of things that are creating an inflammatory environment. Like we're training really hard, we're dieting, like we're stressed. So sleep is going to be really important to help manage that as well and manage your overall inflammation and fluid retention and other variables as well. So that's where it's really important to be looking after yourself holistically and not just think that prep is just push hard and work harder. Sometimes you need to actually pull back and also figure out, okay, how can I balance this overall stress that this sport inevitably puts on my body by looking after myself in other ways, like your sleep, your saunas, meditation, like breath work, whatever that looks like to you. Just making sure that you look after yourself. And I found this in my own prep experience where I really struggled to lean out through my midsection, which is where we predominantly store fat that is as a response of elevated cortisol, essentially. And it took me quite a few years of experimenting with improving my sleep and my stress and doing things like acupuncture as well to try and change the way I responded to stress and dealt with stress. That actually allowed me to then get better results through my comp prep. So over time of dedicating myself to my own stress management, I actually started to see better fat loss in my body. So it's much more powerful than you think. I think it's something a lot of people do overlook, and it really does impact your prep. Even down to how you look on stage. When you're stressed out of your mind on show day, it can change how you look so much. And it doesn't really matter what you're doing with your peak. Like if you're super stressed, chances are you are going to see it in your body. So trying to stay nice and calm and controlled backstage is also really important in terms of bringing your best. So not just throughout your whole prep, but also on show day as well. At the end of the day, competing has taught me so much about discipline, resilience, mindset, and pushing myself beyond what I thought I was capable of. But it's also taught me the importance of balance, health recovery, stress management, and sustainability. I think this sport often gets a bad rap that it's unhealthy or it's damaging your relationship with food or your health. But I truly believe that it doesn't have to be that way when it's done right with the right process and the right support and guidance. And that and all of these lessons that we've gone through today is a huge part of why I coach the way I do now, because I'm so passionate about looking after a client's physical and mental health throughout the process of competition prep. So I really hope this episode gave you guys some insights into the side of competing that a lot of people don't talk about online. And maybe it helped you identify a few red flags that you've maybe seen or things for you to think about if you're thinking about stepping on stage yourself. If you did enjoy this episode, I would absolutely love if you could take 30 seconds to leave me a rating on Spotify. It genuinely helps support the podcast so much and helps me to reach more people. If you know someone that is currently in prep, considering competing, or maybe experiencing some of these red flags that we spoke about today, please send this episode through to them so that we can spread more awareness on this topic and keep more people healthy and safe in the sport of bodybuilding. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next episode.